Hello, welcome or welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Mary and today's video is going to be the worst/most disappointing books that I read in 2023. As always with videos like this, I feel like I have to give you the caveat of these are my personal opinions. If you loved any of these books, if they're your favorite books of the year, I'm so happy for you, that's great. I just didn't like them for whatever reason. And I'm not gonna do like full rant reviews in this video, or at least I'm gonna really try to refrain from doing that because I don't think it's very productive. I'm just going to share the things that really didn't work for me in these books, why I may have not liked them, or if I was disappointed in them, what I was expecting versus what I got. So without further ado, I am going to start with my DNFs of the year. DNFing books is something that I'm really trying to get better at because I do want to be reading things that I like and not reading things that I don't like. I am trying continuously to not push myself to finish books that I'm not enjoying. For my DNFs, I did have 7 DNFs in the year 2023. These are not really in any particular order. They're just sort of in the order that I remembered them. I'm going to try to sort of do them in the order in which I DNF'd them. So first up, we have Dante Alighieri, His Life and Works by Paget Toynbee, which conveniently is right beside me. This is as far as I got in this book. This is a nonfiction book about Dante Alighieri, who wrote Dante's Inferno, Dante's Paradiso, and Purgatorio, I believe. And he was a poet from the 13th century. And this book is like taking a historical glance at his life, Italy at the time, and like his family lines, and perhaps why he came up with the ideas that he came up with for those books. And I just didn't like it very much. I thought it was really boring. It was really dry. It was written around the turn of the century, like 1905 or 1908 or something. And for me, it just didn't really work. Also, it's been a long time since I've read anything by Dante Alighieri. So I think for that to mean anything to me, I would need to reread Inferno and Purgatorio and then finally read Paradiso, which is on my list to do at some point. But I'm not going to force myself to read something I'm not enjoying. And I wasn't enjoying that, so I stopped reading it. Next up, I have A Girl Like That by Tanaz Bethina. This is another book that I started back in January. I didn't fully decide to DNF this until December, but I read like the first half-ish, and this is a book about teenagers in Saudi Arabia. And I believe one of them is from India, or they're both from India. And Saudi Arabia has Sharia at the time this book's written, and I believe still today. So girls aren't allowed to drive. They are not allowed to be alone with boys who are not related to them unless they're married. And at the beginning of this book, or before the book starts, really, the main characters are together in a car and the car crashes and they both die. And so they're watching their families deal with their deaths, and you're learning more about them. Honestly, this book was really heavy when I tried to read it, and I just didn't really care for it that much. I did vlog my experience attempting to read this, so I will link that for you. It was in my Whodunit Readathon vlog. I don't think this is a bad book by any means. I just don't really think it's a book that I'm interested in reading anymore, unfortunately, so I'm not going to force myself to finish it. The next book that I want to talk about is Star Daughter by Shveta Thakkar, and this book is Indian-inspired fantasy, I believe. It's a YA fantasy. It just was very YA, so it was feeling very mid. I didn't really care about it. I was listening to it as an audiobook, and it just got to a point where I was like, I'm having to force myself to read this, so I don't really want to. I remember the premise is that the like main character has magic from the stars because like her mother was a star, maybe, or something like that. There's also like a romance aspect, and it's like a forbidden romance because she falls in love with someone who's like the enemy of the stars. It was just very YA, very typical, very predictable. This was in a book box back in 2020 probably, which is how I heard about it, and I wanted to give it a shot, but YA fantasy just really wasn't hitting for me at the time, and I have no interest in picking it up again. Next up, I did try to read Black Leopard, Red Wolf by Marlon James, which is the first book in a fantasy series. This one was actually really disappointing to me that I didn't like it. It's an African-inspired fantasy. It sounded really good, and it's about this guy Tracker who, I don't even remember the plot now that I'm trying to describe it to you, but I just remember it was like this like lone wolf character who was trying to like find out who was doing these bad things in his community and his tribe, and like all of the insinuations with that. I just didn't like it. I didn't like the way it was written. I didn't like the depiction of like assault and the way that like the violence was handled. I've learned about myself, I'm a little squeamish. Like I don't really want a super violent book. And I'll talk about a couple other books that I rated pretty lowly for the violence as well. But this one, it's really long, and I was getting to a point where I was like, I don't want to read this. So I just put it down and I haven't looked back. Unfortunately, because the cover, stunning, so beautiful. And there's like beautiful editions of this book that I was really hoping that I would love it and that I could buy them and have them on my shelves because they're beautiful. But for me, it just didn't work. I also DNF'd When I'm Gone, Look for Me in the East. I DNF'd this on my honeymoon. This is about a guy who's a monk, I think, and he's like supposed to be going to find, not the Dalai Lama, but like a similar type religious figure in his religion. I don't exactly remember that much of the plot of this. The reason I was interested in it is, one, Quan Berry got a lot of acclaim for something about sticks. We ride among sticks. I don't know, hopefully I'll put it up here, but it's like about field hockey, I think. And I know Kayla from Books and Lala really loved that book and got a lot of hype, and a lot of other people loved that book. That is still on my list to read because I believe that is about like witches in the small town of Massachusetts. The main things about When I'm Gone, Look for Me in the East that didn't work for me, I really hated the writing style. It was really hard to get into because everything is in present tense, even things that you know are happening in the past, because the like narrator only speaks in present tense. And I don't know how else to explain it, but it was just like very difficult to read for me. So I just put it down and I never looked back. Two more. I DNF'd 2 nonfiction books in the month of December. So I DNF'd Grit by Angela Duckworth, which I have talked about this more thoroughly in my December wrap up, but I just basically thought it was like a disingenuous take on how to become successful, because she's basically saying if you work harder than everyone else, you can beat everyone else no matter what your background is, and I just don't think that's true. So I won't go into that too in depth, but it just rubbed me the wrong way. And I also put down Shit Actually by Lindy West, which is an essay collection about different movies, where basically Lindy West had a column and she got pretty like famous, I guess. She went kind of viral for a column that she wrote on Love Actually and how it's really like a shitty love story and like making fun of it. And I think it was supposed to be funnier than it was. I just didn't like, the humor didn't really quite hit with me in this one. And also I hadn't seen several of the movies that she was talking about. And so for that reason, I was just like, if I haven't seen the movie, I'm not going to care about reading the like spoiler synopsis making fun of it. So I just put it down and I never looked back. But those are the 7 books that I DNF'd in 2023. And honestly, to be honest with you, I'm not actually that upset that I DNF'd 7 books, because that's 7 books that I didn't force myself to finish. Now I'm going to go through the books from the like least good to the better ones, starting with my 1 and 2 star reads. So I only give 2 books 1 star this year. 1 star means like I should have DNF'd this book. I really hated it. I like finished it almost. First up, we have Blood Meridian by Cormac McCarthy, which I finished in December. Again, I have a Westerns reading vlog where I read that book. To be honest, all of the books in that vlog pretty much could go on this list of most disappointing for the year, but this is the one that we're going to talk about. It's just like hyper violent. The plot really didn't do anything for me. The characters didn't do anything for me. It just seemed, it was like violent in an unnecessary way to me. And the writing style was really hard to get into and not something that I gelled with. I just didn't like this book, to be honest with you. There's not really anything that I could say that I liked about it. So I hated it. I hated my whole experience reading it. I wish I didn't force myself to finish it. And I'm like so disappointed, because All the Pretty Horses by Cormac McCarthy is one of my like favorite books that I read in high school for school, and I have such fond memories of that. So I was so looking forward to this one, and then I just really didn't like it at all. Also on this list, I have Beneath the Keep by Erica Johansson, which is the prequel to her Fate of the Tearling series. I gave this book 1 star. It was not at all what I wanted it to be. It felt like a cop-out for a lot of things that happened later in the series. Basically, the main series follows Kelsey, who is like supposed to be the heir to the throne in this kingdom, and she has to like go get her kingdom back. But in Beneath the Keep, we're following 3 characters from the original trilogy just before Kelsey is born. So it's like the like 5 years-ish. I don't even know how long it's supposed to be, but it's like slightly before Kelsey is born and before the start of the story. So you see all the things that are set up for you in the novel or in the like main series. And I just didn't really feel like it worked. I wanted it to be a prequel about, at one point in the series, you get like 300 years before the series starts, and that timeline was really interesting to me, so I wanted this to be about that. And when it wasn't, I was already disappointed, and then it just sort of like uses a couple of like really cop-outy things. I'm not going to spoil it for you, but like basically the reason that things end up the way they are, it felt like a cop-out to me. So I didn't love it. 2 star books. I have 30 Things I Love About Myself on this by Radhika Sangani. I don't know how her name is pronounced. But this is about a girl who on her 30th birthday ends up spending the night in jail. She's just broken up with her fiance. She accidentally gets involved in a protest and gets arrested for that. And while she's in jail, she is given this book to read that's like how to love yourself. And so she decides that in her 30th year, she's going to write down 30 things that she loves about herself. This book was fine. It just like, the plot wasn't super great, and she kept like, felt like every time she would take a step forward, she would end up having to take 2 steps back. And what really sealed the deal for me at the end of this book, she says she's at her friend's wedding, and her friend's now husband is saying like all of the things that he loves about his wife and why he knows that she's like the person for him and like how in love he is with her. And the main character is sitting there like, oh my God, what he's saying about her is exactly how I feel about myself. And I hated it. It just really rubbed me the wrong way. I really didn't like that book. So Moby Dick by Herman Melville is on this. I finished this as a punishment to myself, I guess. I read this as an audiobook. I just thought it was really boring. I feel like this story, if I had read an abridged version of this story, I think I could have really liked it because it has a lot of the like imagery and like character archetypes and stuff like that that I feel like could really work. Moby Dick is about this, it's like basically about a guy being driven mad by his desire to kill this whale that he wants to like avenge himself for. And it's about his crew being stuck on this boat with him as he's like delving into his madness. And so for that aspect, I thought it was like a really interesting metaphor, but I just hated the way it was written. It just didn't work for me at all. Then I also gave The Grapes of Wrath by John Steinbeck 2 stars, which I'm pretty disappointed by. I think part of the problem with this book is that it just took me too long to read. I think if I had really been in the mood for it, I could have liked it more. But as it was, I thought it was a little boring, a little dry. I love John Steinbeck's writing style, but I think his books go on too long for me. I remember I loved East of Eden, but it got to a point where I was like, when is it going to be over? Like, it just gets to a point where I just feel like it's not, like, nothing's really happening that's different from what has already happened. Also part of this, I mean, obviously this book is about the Dust Bowl and a family trying to survive through the Dust Bowl and the Great Depression and all of that. And so obviously it's going to be depressing, but it was like so depressing. And it like, there's a difference between a book being sad and a book being like depressing to me, and this one just was too much. I just didn't like it. I also felt like there were certain things that happened that were really creepy. I think part of it was the time that it was written in, and the time period that it was set in, but like the female characters were just not written well or treated well, and I just really like didn't like it. I had like a, sorry if you can hear my dog barking, he's losing his mind. I just really didn't like it, so that's that. Another book I gave 2 stars, which I'm really disappointed in, and I think is gonna be an unpopular opinion, Chain Gang All-Stars. This book came out last year. I read it for my dystopian reading blog, I think, but it's a dystopian set in the future in America, and basically the prison system has evolved to be like gladiator games. And so you follow different chain gangs, which are like, you have links in a chain, which are different prisoners who have voluntarily signed up to fight to the death. And if you make it through, I think you have 1 fight a week for 3 years, I think is what it is, the seasons. And at the end of the 3 years, if you survive, you can be released. So people will do this if they have like a really long sentence. But you also are losing your humanity, and it's shown on television, so people are watching it from their homes. This book was one of those books that had such an interesting concept. The things I really didn't like about it, just to keep this nice and short, I really disliked the footnotes. I felt like they were very heavy-handed. You can get the message from just reading the book, and if the footnotes had all just been like the backstory of the different people who were being fought by the main people that you're following, I would have liked that much more. But a lot of them have like statistics on who's in prison. And first of all, if this is supposed to be set in the future, those statistics would not be the same. It might be similar, but like it was weird that the statistics were for 2023 or 2022, whenever this was written, if it was supposed to be set in like 2050. Like that is strange to me. And even if this book had been written as if it was like a historical document, kind of like The Handmaid's Tale is written as if it's an ethnography about this time, that would have been better. That would have worked better for me, I guess is what I'm saying. But as it was, it didn't really work for me. I thought it was really heavy-handed in the messaging. I didn't like the footnotes. And I also I wish the whole book builds up to this like one big fight, but you don't really care about the other side of the fight, right? Like if they had been following both sets, like both chains, I would have cared more. But you don't start following the second chain until like way too far into the book for me. And so I just felt like the tension wasn't really there. I didn't really like the ending either. I know some people really like the ending. They thought it was like really powerful and like, oof, but I felt like it was very obvious. So I just didn't really like that book. But again, if you liked it, I'm glad you liked it. I thought the concepts, again, were so interesting and that it was really well written. I loved the beginning of that book, but it just sort of lost me as it went along. Vampires, Hearts, and Other Dead Things by Margie Fuston? I don't know. This is a YA contemporary. It won some award, and basically the premise is this girl's dad is dying. She and her dad have been obsessed with vampires her whole life, and so she thinks if she can go to New Orleans, find a vampire, get bitten by the vampire, come back, bite her dad, he will live forever. That's the premise. I thought it was a little weird for a couple reasons. One, she's like in high school, and so do high schoolers still believe in vampires? I did not. I mean, I don't know. Maybe that's, so I had a problem with that. And then also like, this did the thing where it's like, is it paranormal? Is it not paranormal? Kind of the whole time. And I didn't like it. Also, there's like a little bit of a romance subplot with like her friend that ends up going to New Orleans with her. And I didn't understand why that existed. To be honest with you, this book, I just didn't like it very much, obviously. But like, it just didn't work for me. It was nothing that I was looking for. I like books that deal with grief and death. But like, I don't know. I just didn't like this one very much. And then sadly, A Walk in the Woods by Bill Bryson also got 2 stars. I didn't realize I gave this book 2 stars, but I do remember not liking my read of it. But this book, God, I feel bad. My mom loves this book, and like it's a movie now, and this is one of those books that I've been wanting to read for like a decade, and I finally got to it. But I've read 2 Bill Brysons this year, and neither of them I really liked, so I think I'll probably... No, I still want to read The Body, A Guide for Occupants. I still want to read that. I don't know. He's got such like hype behind him, but I just haven't really, I don't really like his books. But yeah, this one is about him hiking the Appalachian Trail and like the people he meets along the way. I just thought it was boring personally, so sorry about that if you're a Bill Bryson fan. Now I'm going to talk about books that disappointed me. These are not books that got 1 or 2 stars. These are just books that I had such high hopes for that fell flat, okay? And I'm going to try to run through them pretty quickly. So I have An Heir to the Moon by Emily X. Arpan. I'm so sad about this book. I gave it 3 stars. It was fine. It's a YA fantasy romance type thing. It's based on Chinese mythology and sort of like Romeo and Juliet. Again, similar to Star Daughter. I read Star Daughter right after this, which is why I DNF'd it. So I was like, no, not again. But this book was fine, but I loved her other book. And this one just didn't really work for me. I just thought it was a little boring, a little like basic. And I was sad because it's got such a pretty cover and I wanted to love it, but I just didn't. Fate of the Tearling is the last book in Erica Johansson's Queen of the Tearling series. Oh my gosh. The ending of this book sucks, okay? It was just a cop-out ending for me, so I didn't like it. And also, reading Beneath the Keep after I finished the series, I didn't understand why Beneath the Keep was about what it was about when the series ended the way it did. And if you've read it, you know. If you haven't read it, you don't know. But I loved the first 2 books in the series, and I loved the first, like, 3/4 of the last book, okay? That is why I was so disappointed in the ending of this book. I think I gave it 4 stars still, because I still think it was, like, a really good book. She writes... It's such a good series, but the ending just tanks it for me. It was so disappointing. I don't know if she's written anything else. I haven't looked into it, but I am interested in reading other things by her, but I was so disappointed in the end of this one. I also have Tiny Beautiful Things by Cheryl Strayed on this list. This is a like self-help, it's like a memoir based on a self-help column called Dear Sugar that Cheryl Strayed wrote. Cheryl Strayed is the author of Wild, which is about another like hiking a trail. It's about her hiking the Pacific Crest. I think is what that trail is called. I have not read that book. I do own it, so I will read it at some point. Yeah, this one just, I don't know. I didn't really like it. I thought the Dear Sugar thing was a little infantilizing, and I get that that's her whole like columns thing, but had I known that going in, I probably wouldn't have read it. And it's just her like responding to writers' questions, and she tried to make it like a novel format, or not novel, but like cohesive, and I just didn't work for me. I just wasn't a super big fan of it. It was fine. I have 2 true crime books that I read this year, and I'm wondering if true crime maybe isn't for me. I'll Be Gone in the Dark by Michelle McNamara, I think. I didn't write the author's name down, but I think that's right. And then I also read The Stranger Beside Me by Anne Rule. And both of these books, so I'll Be Gone in the Dark is about the search for the Golden Gate Killer, and it's this one lady who is an author who becomes obsessed with him, and she dies before the book is published, so it's published posthumously. And she also, spoiler, I guess, there are no spoilers in true crime, but Michelle McNamara dies before the Golden State Killer is caught. And her whole book, she's like going through different theories about who it could be, and she's wrong, okay? So it was like a waste of I just didn't like it. Like, I'm happy that they published it for her because it was her life's work, but what? I don't know. I didn't like it. I thought it was fine and interesting to read, but also it does the thing that I hate when true crime does, which is where you get all these innocent people who were not actually killers, but maybe they were. So you like talk about all their lives and like why you think maybe they murdered a bunch of people. And I just find that so like upsetting. Also, The Stranger Beside Me by Anne Rule. This one's interesting because Anne Rule was like friends with Ted Bundy. They worked together at a crisis hotline, I think, and she knew him while he was committing these murders. And so it's interesting to read about her relationship to him, but also like I wish it had been more about her relationship to him. And I hear people praising this book because it is a lot about like the victims and what he did, but that like anyone can find that out. I wanted to know what she knew personally from knowing him. You know? It just wasn't what I wanted it to be, I guess. So that's why I was disappointed in that one. I was also disappointed in Girl Forgotten by Karen Slaughter. This is the second book in the Andrea Oliver series. And I didn't know going into this that this is a procedural type thing. So she's a Secret Service agent, I believe. I don't know. Karen Slaughter, I read, what is that? The Last Witness or something? False Witness, that's what it's called, by Karen Slaughter. And I really enjoyed that book, but it was very dark and very like gritty and what's the word? Like disturbing. So I was expecting that going into this one, but I just didn't like the plot as much. I didn't like the main character as much. I'm not interested in reading about police or Secret Service. Like that's just not something that I like, unfortunately. So, and also like, again, the graphic nature of this book, it was almost too much for me. So yeah, I don't know if Karen Slaughter's really an author for me at this point, but I didn't really like that book that much. Before the Coffee Gets Cold by Toshikazu Kawaguchi. A lot of people love this book. And so I think I just went into it with like really high expectations. This is a like magical realism book set where there's this cafe, and if you sit in this one spot in the cafe, you can go back in time, and you can't change the future or anything, but you can like relive a moment, but you have to stay in this spot and you have to return before your coffee gets cold or you get stuck as like a ghost-like creature. I just didn't really care about it that much. People talk about how sad this book is. I didn't think it was that sad. I just didn't like, it just didn't hit for me the way it hits for other people. So that's a me thing. I'm gonna remove the other ones from my TBR if they're even on my TBR, because I'm just not interested in reading more about it. But it was fine, but I just like didn't get it, I guess. And then finally we have The Devil and the Dark Water by Stuart Turton. This is the second Stuart Turton book that I just haven't really liked that much. He writes closed circle mysteries. So the first one is The 7.5 Deaths of Evelyn Hardcastle. Okay, so let me back up. He writes closed circle mysteries with like a fantastical twist. So in The 7.5 Deaths of Evelyn Hardcastle, we are following a main character who wakes up 7 days, I think, or 8 days, I don't remember. But he has 7 days or 8 days or whatever it is to solve this murder of Evelyn Hardcastle, but he's in a different person's body each day. So it's an interesting concept, but that book just dragged for me a little bit. It just went on too long and just wasn't that good. And then the payoff was weird. This book, similarly, goes on too long. There's no like switching bodies for the characters, which for me was the best part of the other book that he wrote, but you're on a boat. It's like the 1500s, I think. And there's this entity, for lack of a better word, called Black Tom, who is like a ghost that's haunting this boat, and everyone is trying to figure out what is going on with Black Tom. And honestly, it was mid. I don't know. I just didn't really care that much about it. So I did listen to it as an audiobook, which I think made it more confusing to me, but all said and done, I don't really care about it, and I might not read any more Stuart Turton. He has such good concepts, and I want to like his books. I just don't. They're like a little long for me, and they drag, and they're just never quite what I want them to be. So on that note, those are the worst and most disappointing books that I read in 2023, along with some of the books that I DNF'd. Please feel free to let me know in the comments down below if you disagree with me. Also, let me know what your worst book of 2023 is, or like the most disappointing book for you. Again, this is not a personal attack. If you like any of these books, I'm so happy for you. They just didn't work for me, and I'm trying to explain the reasons why they didn't work for me, so that maybe if these things you do like, you can pick those books up and you will like them. Because the great thing about reading is that everyone has different tastes, right? So we can all like and dislike different things. I know I love some books that other people are like, ew, worst book ever. It is what it is. It's fine. We don't have to agree with each other, but I would really like it if you could be respectful in the comments down below. But thank you so much for watching this video. Like it if you liked it. Subscribe to my channel if you want to see more videos from me, because I am pumping out my end of the year content, and I will see you in the next video very soon. Bye!